Today we're talking about the challenges and also some successful strategies for young adult ministry. It's episode 16 of the Sustainable Ministry Show, The Most Important Answer. Well, hey, everybody. We are back again with the Sustainable Ministry Show, and today we've got Scott Pontier and Chris Sasser with us, and we're going to talk a little bit about young adult ministry and what that looks like within the church, and hopefully clarify or maybe even muddy up those waters a little more for you as you continue to work there. I want to remind you that next week, March 23rd, is our live show. So Stephen Ingram, Melissa Rao, and myself, we will get started at 2 o'clock. Feel free to, we'll post a link on our Facebook page. That'll go out in an email. Feel free to join in on that conversation. And we'll see where it goes. It will be a lot of fun. And the other thing I want to ask you to do, and I'll remind you at the end, is if you listen to the podcast on iTunes and you're enjoying it, we would love for you to go review it and tell us what you think. And if you're not enjoying it, feel free to do that too. Tell us what you think. But we really want the folks who are enjoying it to let us know. So, Chris, you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're at.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. My name is Chris Sasser. I am the Director of Family Ministries at Port City Community Church in Wilmington, North Carolina. I've been in kind of youth and children's and family and young adult ministry for all of my adult life. At this point, it's like 23, 24 years. Been working with Ministry Architects since 2008. And what I wonder, Bryant, is can you delete the bad comments on the reviews? Like, is that even possible to do? Like, if someone gave a bad one, could we get rid of it? I don't even know.
We could beg them to do that, and they could go back and do it.
But we don't have control to do that.
We don't have control over that. Yeah.
Okay. Just wondering. Not that anybody would do that, but I'm just wondering. So anyway, I do love kind of work with kind of college students and young adults. Been doing that all through ministry for a long time, and I know it's something that we're all trying to figure out how to do because it feels like it's really important for us to figure out how to do it. So I'm excited to be here to talk about that today.
Excellent. Scott, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself as we get started?
Sure. I'm Scott Pontier. I work for a multi-site church in West Michigan called Harbor Churches. I'm the lead pastor of one of our campuses there. I just planted that campus last fall, so about 4 or 5 months ago. And I've also been in ministry stuff since all of my adult life, and working with Young Life and a lot of youth ministry stuff. And it seems like most of the churches that I've been at, I've also been tasked to start up college or young adult ministries. And then in the church planting world, as we've been multiplying churches, we've done a lot of work with young adults and starting young adult ministries there, and really seeing young adult ministry as a part of the next generation of churches that we're beginning to as well. So that's been pretty fun.
Yeah, it seems like such a crucial part of ministry in churches, and it's one that, as Chris, you said earlier, churches are trying to figure out. So maybe let's start, like, when we say young adults, what do we mean? What do you guys think of? Is that a specific age group? Is it the, the wide 18 to 45 group that some churches label as young adults? What are we talking about there?
Yeah, I've seen... I guess my answer would qualify, it depends on your church, but there has to be an answer for it. Right? I think generally, and Chris probably would agree to this too, like broadly you're talking 18 to 30-year-olds, somewhere in that world. And most often for many churches, it ends when you have the first baby.
Yep.
So whether you're married or you're single, whatever. But I've seen lots of churches really drill into that specifically and break that down. One church I was just with last week, they've decided that their young adult ministry is going to be around college students that are their kids from their youth group that are away at college. We want to reach them. That arm is college students in our local area because they have colleges nearby. And then another arm is it's single and married 20-somethings. And that's how they do it.
Yeah, and I would agree with Scott. And a lot of churches, I think, typically when they think young adults, they probably think on the lower end of that spectrum. They think probably 18 to 25 or 26. but it does certainly go up. But for me, it's more of a stage of life shift that happens to get someone out of the young adult, which is what Scott just described. If you get married, is certainly if you have a child, that kind of takes you out of the young adult sort of world, even if you're still a young adult, right? We all know a lot of 25-year-olds who get married and have their first child, but they don't feel like young adults anymore because they're in kind of a different world. And so I think it's so true. Different churches can define it different ways. You just got to look at your landscape and see what you have and what you want to go after and deal with it in that way.
I think the most important answer is to answer it, is to come up with an intentional range that you're talking about. Most churches just don't. And I think that's like, we like to talk about sustainable systems and things like that. That's a sustainable thing, is to start with nailing your target and saying, this is who we're at. And a lot of churches do that based on who we're not reaching right now.
Right.
Your church may have a great ministry to young families. You got little kids running around everywhere. You're not worried about an age group of people who are having little kids. You're already doing that. So for you, it might be college students or just post-college. Other churches might have great college ministry, and for them, young adults is that 20-something after you graduate to when you have your first kid or till you get married or something like that. So it sort of depends on what your church has and doesn't have and how they feel led to frame that target really clearly.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. That target audience is so important, and we do that well. Like with children's ministry, because that is labeled and it's specific.
Mm-hmm.
We do that well with youth ministry because it's labeled and it's specific. And young adults seems to be, as you guys are pointing out, one of those places that churches have wrestled with. What are some of the challenges then that we face building a young adult ministry?
I'll talk about that a little bit. I think oftentimes one of the challenges that churches have is that they look at young adults as potential labor more than anything else, right? Brent, we were talking earlier and how your experience with young adults has been, and we recruit them to come be a part of youth group because they're fun. And, we don't want just the moms and dad, the gray hairs around anymore. We got to have that energy in youth ministry, or we want, a college student who's great with children to lead a small group. And so we target them as volunteers or servants or whatever it is that your church uses, and that's as far as we go with them because we need them, and we don't take time to really invest in them. And what we think is the way if we are going to have a young adult ministry, then we have to have an event, right, that they can come to, and there's got to be worship, there's got to be a speaker, and we got to kind of create this little micro young adult church. That's what they want, and I think we missed the boat on that. I don't know that that's what they want necessarily, and so one of the obstacles is we think that we're just going to use them as volunteers, and then if we're going to produce something, it's got to be big, and that's not always true.
I've been in a number of churches where they have, like, in their youth group or their kids ministry, all they have is like parents and 40-somethings, and so their expressed goal with young adults is we need 20-somethings to be our youth group leaders,
right. And
for some reason that's the most important thing. So I think you're right. We just have to do that volunteer reading thing, and that's how we get them. If I think overall, one of the biggest struggles we have, it really comes out of what you said, Chris. We don't have a clear vision of what it is we're trying to get with that generation.
That's right.
For me, if I want to help a church start a new young adult ministry, I want to get them as clear and as focused on something like our job is to engage young adults in the life and leadership of our church, right? If we do that, then all of a sudden how we go about doing that starts to really get clear, and it might even change from what you're trying to do right now. Most churches, I think, just default to, well, our mission with young adults is just to get them to show up.
Yeah, right. We need them.
We need them. We don't have them. We want them. So what will attract them here? And especially with the generation we have right now, they're not really interested. They're marketed to 6 ways from Sunday in this culture. They don't need us to market to them. They need us to engage them in the life and leadership of our church.
That's
and
right.
that is a very different approach than most churches think about or take.
Yeah, at some level, it almost seems like a graduated, fun youth group that churches try to provide. And sounds like what you're talking about, Scott, is really finding opportunities for leadership. So what are those places? Are you thinking like committees, some leadership within the church, being a part of different teams?
I think I tend to think a little bit outside of the box. I think it's fine if you want. A lot of churches go the route of saying we need to put a representative on every team. How do we get a college student on the visioning team, or how do we get a young adult on the session, or on the leadership board of elders? And I think that's fine in as far as it goes. But if you really want to think beyond that, and how do we engage that generation of people, I think you have to equip them to lead in the directions they want to go. There was a great story that I read in a book recently that talked about, the young adults in your church, they don't want to run the thing you built. They want to build their own thing. This is a generation of people that, have been taught all their life that they can be whatever they want. And they start up tech companies, and they're successful in the NBA right out of college and stuff like that. And they sit in the church, and we go, you have to wait until you're 50 before you can really lead in this place. They want to go start their own thing. How do we get behind them, create a laboratory for them to get up their own ideas of leadership and mission? And how do we just get behind them and follow where they're going?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you've talked to Kenda Dean, because her and Mark, I think that's exactly what they're doing with Ministry Incubators, is trying to provide a space for some of that to happen. And her question is, why is that not happening in the church?
Yeah, there was a quote I saw recently about a church that they were looking for, how do we engage people in the leadership of our church based on leadership gifts, not whose turn is it next. And so they finally they had this one person they were really excited about, and they said, man, but I don't know, he's just so young. Let's make him an elder in training for now, and he's 35. Right? And I just thought, man, you can be president of the United States in this company, but you can't be a leader in a church, or in this, you can't be a leader in the church when you're 35. So we got to change that.
Such a good point. So I wonder, are there 2 or 3 other things that we might be able to share with folks that you would say either answer these questions or explore these ideas as they're working in young adult ministry?
I would say that, and I'll go back to a little bit of maybe something that we miss, or why it maybe not be working in some churches, is it takes a lot of time and effort to do this, and it's more individualized oftentimes with this group than it is sort of big box cookie cutter. And so I would say that you've got to have people that are willing to invest time in these young adults. And it was funny listening to kind of Scott talk about some of that stuff. We've kind of at our church over the last couple of years sort of piloted, if you will. I guess we're going into year 3, so it's not a pilot anymore. Kind of a development program that we're calling the Leadership Journey. It's for college students. It's juniors and seniors in college, and what we want to do. Our mission with them is to equip and develop them to be leaders who can engage and lead in the world. And this is not a ministry necessarily development deal, but one of the biggest things that we've done is kind of the whole first semester of it is taking them through an awaken process that helps them learn who they are, helps them learn who their gifts are, where they're kind of leaning. But it took a lot of time and effort and energy from some folks spending a lot of time with these kids. And so that's what I would say that people need to know is it feels like they need individualized sort of smaller group attention, and it's got to be intentional leadership of them more, and you've got to just be willing to jump into that and know that. And you got to give them grace. You got to know that they can be flighty. They can not show up sometime, and they can, they need to be pushed, but yet encouraged in their development. And I love what Scott said about how we want them to not necessarily have to lead our thing, but let's find out what God's put in them and what's their thing. And that's what we found is when we kind of talk to kids who are going through the journey, one of the things I've really loved about it is that most of them that are going through it are not going to go into the church full time, or to do ministry. They're going to go be a nurse and do ministry, or they're going to go, one guy's getting ready to head off to a big bank and do ministry, but he's got a deep faith as a 21-year-old And that's been developed over the last couple of years, but it's taken a lot of time. And so churches got to be willing to have a small group of people who are willing to invest in these students over time, really in an individualized way.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things. The first thing I think folks need to know that like mission is the new softball team, right? Like when you think about church, and
that's right.
there are people in churches, especially if you're like in that generation of like 35 and older. Like I know a guy who the only reason he's at church is because he came and started the softball team, and that's just his thing. Softball is his thing. And there are a lot of people where that softball team at that church is the thing, right? So for young adults, millennial generation, mission is their softball team. So whatever you're doing, trying to get young adults to show up, don't even focus on that. Try to get young adults engaged in either the mission you're doing as a church or a mission they can lead out on, and go beyond like, raking leaves at the old folks home that you do with the middle schoolers, right? Think about like, how can we impact our community and change it? And millennials want that. They're all about that. Young adults want to be part of that. So really focus on I saw a study recently that said there are not many churches that are doing much with young adults as a whole, but of the churches that are, the number one thing that they're working on is mission stuff, service projects, mission trips, anything around missions. And then the second one I would say is that not just like getting behind their mission is really, really important, but we have to understand that in discipling them, it's a lot of what Chris said is we have to be prepared to send them away because they are transient. They're not great with commitments yet. They are a group of people that are figuring that stuff out. But if we shape our discipleship of them as a sending, we're going to be far more successful than, well, here's the small group you need to be part of for the next 5 years. We don't even expect you're going to be in our church 5 years from now, but you're going to be over in Chris's church. So what if I make you one of his greatest leaders, his best discipled people before they even get there? We have to be prepared to say, look, these people are not going to be around for a long time, and we shouldn't see that as a detriment. We should see it as an opportunity to say we're going to reach this generation by sending them and training them and sending them and training them and sending them and doing that again and again, which is exactly what Chris is doing right now. I think that's a really important value.
Well, I'm so grateful.
And I think an important piece of that you were talking about.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think an important piece of that you were just talking about, Scott, is what it does is it helps them believe that we have their best interests at heart, right? I know it's one of your big kind of things that you're going to be talking about in your book is they need and they believe in authenticity. And so if my young adult or college ministry program is simply designed to build up people to go serve in my church and, go to the small group next, well, then they know they're just a part of the system, right? They sort of are inherently skeptical that you have their best interests at heart. And so you got to just dig into who they are, what God's doing in them, send them off. And I think also another piece of it, just I know what we've learned in the last couple of years is that I think a lot of churches, probably spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, well, if we get a group of young adults together, what are we going to teach them? Like, what's the curriculum? What's the right leadership development strategy? What are the books we're going to read? And you know what? They don't care. Right? There are 1,000 of them that we could pick that are all going to be good, right?
Yeah.
But what they want is the investment. And the investment is what will pay off over time because, most of the churches that we work with and that are out there, you're going to pick good, biblical, solid, gospel-centered stuff to teach them. Just pick something and go with it. It doesn't matter what it is. Make the effort to invest in them as people and show them that you're just not trying to grow them up into little church members at your church. You want to send them out to go impact the world in a big way. And they'll respond.
They know that right away. They can tell.
Yes.
You put the thing in your bulletin that says, stay after the service for pizza and volleyball. They know you're trying to find a way to get more of them there. Like they're the commodity you're trying to get.
You got it.
They don't want to be a commodity. They want to be activators. They want to be leaders. They want to make an impact in the world. So if you can focus on that and focus on helping them focus on that,
that's right.
Then you're going to make some real impact. And that's not going to happen by saying, all we need is a better Sunday school class for 20-year-olds.
No, don't even try.
Yeah.
I think that's a real gift to the church, just even hearing that statement. That this is young adult ministry is more about preparing to send than it is about bringing them in. And that may be a real gift for folks who have struggled for so long to bring people in, to think we've got a handful of folks who we can prepare to send, because we know at some point they're going to go somewhere else. So how can we help them become the best disciples that they can be? That is a huge gift that you guys have shared this afternoon. If people have more questions about young adult ministry, I kind of think you two are one of the places they should start. How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, you can reach out to me at scott@ministryarchitects.com. Just email me. You can look me up at on Facebook too, facebook.com/Scott Pontier. But I'll get back to you a lot quicker if you email me.
You can get me at chris.sasser@ymarchitects.com. I'm on Facebook, Chris Sasser. Twitter at SassGymSocks, GYMSOX. 2 S's, SASS. Don't ask. But yeah, that's the best way to catch me.
Or if you do ask, just ask on Twitter.
Yeah. You can, but I don't like respond to things on Twitter because I'm not really on it that much. So maybe Facebook. Well, email. Email's the best way for sure.
Hey, and before I close this up, Scott, Chris mentioned that you're working on a book.
Yeah, Mark DeVries and I have been working on a book for a little while just around this issue of young adults. And really what we're doing in 2 parts in this book. The first part is around the 6 mistakes that most churches are making with young adults today. And the interesting thing about the mistakes is that they often feel like successes at the time. So it feels like a great idea to add "and young adults" to the youth director's title. But that actually is a big mistake to say, to add that into youth director's job description. They think it's a great success to just start a young adult program, but it's probably more of a mistake. So that's the first half of our book. And then the second half of the book is getting us engaged in a bunch of like game-changing mindsets to say, rather than focusing on millennials, how about you focus on mission? And you'll actually succeed there. And so there's about 6 of those that we unpacked there too. So Mark and I are plowing through that. We're hoping that we're going to have that thing edited probably within the next month or 2. And sometime this year, that ought to be out for folks to get. Really what we hope is not just to do what other books and blog posts do and say, man, we got a real problem with millennials, but to say, we actually have a real opportunity with millennials. And beyond just casting the vision, here's steps and systems that you can use to actually impact millennials in your church, no matter what kind of church you have. Even with traditional old worship services, you can make a big impact with millennials. And that's really what the book's about.
Love it. I love it. There's not a lot of resources out right now for young adult ministry, and so that will be one more to add to the list. I can't wait to get my hands on it and see all the good thought and reflection there. My name is Bryant Johnson. You can find me by email, bryant@ministryarchitects.com or facebook.com/Bryant Johnson. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. Just pull up Ministry Architects, like us there. Subscribe to the podcast either through YouTube or on iTunes. And if you are listening on iTunes, we would love it if you would take just a minute and go and review the show there as well. Thanks for spending the afternoon with us, you guys, and talking about young adult ministry. Grateful.
Hey, Bryant.
Yeah.
I know it's March, and it's probably March Madness, so...
You got something to say?
I'm just saying. Go Heels.
We'll make sure to tag Jen in that as well. Awesome. Well, thanks, you guys.
Ha ha!